Hello, everybody. This is Scott Freymuller, Shelley Netco, and Tiffany, our psychotherapist. So we're back here on the Mental Knot, and we're going to talk about emotional sobriety. And honestly, today is the first time I've ever heard that term.
Okay.
And it's powerful.
Mm-hmm.
And we keep talking about it and talking about it and talking about it. So we're just going to lay it down.
Okay.
So teach us.
So emotional sobriety is basically learning how to regulate one's feeling state. So in other words, not becoming, thank you, not becoming overly emotionally activated or really down-regulating as well. So to the point where you're like robotic, like you see something tragic and you're just like, oh yeah, that's cool, whatever. That's not having emotional sobriety either.
Okay, so how do you teach it? Like, how do you
teach emotional sobriety?
Yeah, like what?
So I don't think I go into anything like teaching emotional sobriety, but I do talk a lot with people about how to regulate their emotions. So our nervous system is made up of our spine and our brain. So most of us are constantly in fight or flight mode. Think about that. We're constantly assessing for safety and danger. Whether you're driving, if you're walking into a new environment, you're looking to kind of like, okay, where's the exit? Does this person look safe to me? That's just the way the nervous system works. So let me break this down for you. Dr. Stephen Porges, he termed something called the polyvagal theory. And the polyvagal theory is all about how we are able to regulate ourselves. And there is something called our ventral vagus nerve.
Mm-hmm.
And it is when we feel calm and safe and content. Think about that if you're on the beach, right? You just got back from vacation.
Yeah.
Think about like being on the beach.
Like, I want to chill.
Yeah, you're just like hanging out. So usually I have a whiteboard and I'm like drawing this out on a whiteboard actually. So I'm just like winging it, just like I always do. And then there's something called our dorsal vagus nerve. And that is when we are immobilized, in shock and collapsed. Think about times when you have like received really shocking news or something like tragic has happened and you're numb, you don't know what to do. We usually call that freezing, right? And then there's that like sympathetic nervous state where it's like constantly fight or flight. That's where anxiety is born and that's where it lives. And most of us are constantly in that place. Think about everything, all the information that's like hitting us on a daily basis. We are inundated with information. We're taking it in. We're having to process it. And for some people, it can create noticeable anxiety, or some of us just take it in and we're just like, oh yeah, like I'm nervous and I'm anxious for no reason. There's always a reason. Our brain just doesn't know what to do with it. So because of that, because we are kind of just in this like prolonged state of anxiety, a lot of us don't know how to experience something and have like a proper emotional response to it. So someone might become like super, super startled or super irritable or super angry for something that I might perceive as no big deal. So there's so much that goes into it. We talked about like meditation earlier. Meditation, breath work, whatever you want to call it. When you slow your body down, when you slow your nervous system down through breath work and breathing, it activates like the prefrontal cortex of the brain, which is responsible for like logical decision making. So in other words, if there were to be like a bomb that was dropped over there, like we would probably like startle and look at it and just kind of go into that like fight or flight mode. That's actually a terrible example, but like what I'm trying to say is like that would be an appropriate response. Like we would be startled and we would like go over there and look at what's happening. And we would probably talk about it for days and days and days on end, that we had this like very traumatic thing and that we witnessed. And as human beings, we were not designed to do that. I want you to think about like a zebra grazing for a minute. Okay. Now think about a lion chasing a zebra. That zebra is running to get away. And let's just say it gets away. It goes back to grazing like almost immediately.
Because it's like normal for
Because it's normal.
We don't do that.
We don't do that.
Mm-mm.
We
We stay stuck in
yes.
the chase.
And we're just like for like days or months or maybe years after, we're just like, oh my God,
Chronic
I got
anxiety.
chased by a lion.
Yes.
Like,
Tell
and
everyone
you're
you know.
you're right. And
15
that's what
years
we were
ago.
talking about earlier about like staying in that state of like trauma and
Yes.
drama and like a victim mentality. Oh my gosh, this thing happened to me. And it defines
And then that's
who
where the
am.
I have anxiety
Yes.
is adopted.
Yep.
What in the heck?
Yes. So,
Okay, here's a question.
okay.
This is the quietest I've ever been, by the way. Note,
You don't have a whoopee.
I don't have a whoopee either.
Pick your whoopee up, sir.
But here's the thing. So how do you know if your response is appropriate or not? Like
So
Someone's going to tell you.
no. What
I'm
I'm
kidding.
saying, like emotionally, see, like I'm getting the science, but like, how do you? I don't know. I don't know even what to ask. This
So
is
I
fascinating.
like I hear your question. I think a lot of us, especially when we're younger, we might not know because it's just our norm until someone points it out to us. Like I'll give you an example that I just thought of right now. When I was younger, I had this friend, and every time like I got excited, like I would like tap her, hit her, and she was just like, "Why are you doing that? Don't do that." And she told me so many times, and I would still hit her. And she was just like, "I don't like that." And I was like, "But I'm excited. I want to tell you something," not even realizing that I was like, quote, dysregulated. Like I didn't know how to use my words to say like, "I'm so excited to talk to you. I can't wait to like go swimming." Like we used to hang out all the time. So it's usually someone pointing it out to us, or when we are in addiction, we realize that we have been like acting out, and we take time to slow down and then become regulated, like learning the tools to become
Like
regulated.
being present and all
Being
that kind
present, slowing down.
Like almost getting to that place of neutrality, right?
Absolutely.
of stuff.
Absolutely.
So I'm relating this to, like, the outside world can't determine your emotional state. Like you decide your emotional state.
It's not supposed to.
It's not supposed to. I mean, I know it's
Determine.
impossible. Like for me,
Right.
it would be impossible,
Right.
right?
Right.
Like if I see something shiny, I'm going to react. But I also don't get, like what you're saying, I don't get angry as much as I used to.
How
The
come?
healthier I get,
Well, okay,
Is
let me ask you a question.
okay,
How did you get healthier? Like what are
counseling,
your okay.
dealing with my shit.
What does that look like?
It looks like truth. It looks like talking about what bothers me
Okay.
and being honest with myself. But
What
then
happens
also,
if you don't?
then it comes out sideways. If
What-
I don't talk about like what bothers me and how I feel, then it does come out sideways. Like something might happen, and then I might overreact. Like I might
Okay.
get extra angry
Right.
or extra sad or whatever.
Right.
But that's
That's emotional sobriety. So acknowledging the feeling. So we have to acknowledge something before we can know what to do with it, before we can regulate it. So in this theory that I'm talking about, which is called polyvagal theory, there's something called glimmers.
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 Okay.
And basically, and I'm going to explain what they are in a second. Basically, when you utilize these, you are manually overriding your nervous system. So you can like be in the middle of like having like an anxiety attack. And if you utilize these skills, you can once again override your nervous system to bring you into a calmer state. So what are glimmers? Glimmers can be, most of us have glimmers and we just don't even know that we're using them. It can come in the form of visualizations, right? Like think about being on a beach, like you probably feel like calm and relaxed. Think about like your children, think about anything that brings you pleasure and or joy. Those things are glimmers. It can be a fidget toy. I know you had like a thing up here earlier, right? That can be a glimmer. It helps us to regulate. Why do we fidget? Right? Like I have fidget toys in my office that people use all the time. It's because it helps us to regulate ourselves. And when we become more comfortable with like any feeling that we are experiencing, that is what emotional sobriety is. Because so many of us are just like, oh, hey, like I owe it to myself. I'm gonna like, use this drug or drink or whatever, because it's what we've known for so long. And understanding that it can be a different way. Like, yep, you're going to have emotions and they might suck, they might be great, but to acknowledge it, lean into it, and at the end of the day, know that you're okay. It's like having like autonomy and like ownership over your mind and your body.
This emotional sobriety piece, though, like we talk about the cycle, right? And that we have a habit of being in this toxic, dramatic life experience, right? Like this cycle that goes around and around and around. And sometimes we forget how to get out of that cycle. And this is part of this emotional sobriety thing.
Absolutely.
This is cool, right? Like, this is pretty bitchin'.
I like it.
I'm getting excited. Okay, so
I've never heard words put to it, but
I know
Okay.
emotional
concept
sobriety.
is
like-
so-
The concept is familiar, but like
it's very
we don't-
familiar.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, this is so like we're actually putting a science behind keeping our shit together, so to
Yep.
speak, right?
Yep.
And I hate to use those words, but like that's the power of it.
Right.
So how do you get out of this cycle? Like, okay, so
For someone who's unaware
well, not even that, but like
or out of control.
so I
or-
think we all work super, super hard to be the best people we can be, right? But I still get in that habit of old habits.
Right.
And then like how do you get out of it? How do you in emotional sobriety way, like how do you get out of it?
I
What
don't
do you
know that there's like one easy answer
Is there
for
a
that.
5-step process? I think that's what he's looking for.
There's no like
Dude, I'm just gonna to write some stuff down. You know what I mean? Just write some stuff down for me.
He's like,
and that'll
one.
be cool.
Okay, I did number
like,
one.
can I just push a button and
Right.
make shit cool?
like there's no like process to saying here's how you get out of it. Sometimes it's pointed out to us for people who like we're talking right now, so you're gaining knowledge, and it's like, how do you want to apply that knowledge? So one of the things is I'm gonna lean back on spirituality and like prayer and breath work, if that's what you're into. When you exercise, so if you're like working on like, I don't know, like curls and you're, into working out and stuff, and you are strengthening your bicep, when you do breath work, you're strengthening your prefrontal cortex. So the more oxygen you allow into your brain, you're going to notice small, slight differences over time. So something that you would have reacted to in, an unfavorable way on Monday, if you practice breath work, it might look different a week later. It doesn't mean like emotional regulation does not mean that we are in like control of our emotions all the time. It means that we're aware of it and we have a choice in how we want to respond. Responding is different than reacting.
I have a good example of this, and it might help you. So this
He
was,
just looks lost.
I think this will help. So this was April Fool's Day last week, and my husband passed away on April Fool's Day 15 years
you told
ago.
me this.
Okay.
And no one has played April Fool's joke on me since then. No one has mentioned April Fool's Day, or I just don't even participate, and I've never even thought about it. So somebody played an April Fool's joke on me, a close friend. And it was so good, and it was just amazing when I got afterwards, sat back and thought about it. And I bought into it, and I was sitting there with my daughter, and then, I called this person and got in the whole thing.
Oh, it sounds like it was like an elaborate.
It was
thing.
elaborate.
Okay.
Elaborate. Police were involved,
Oh, wow.
all kinds of things. So when I hung up the phone, I got a text from him, and he said, "What day is it?" And I just started crying. But it was because of 15 years ago.
Right.
So I had to sit with it a minute, and I looked at her and I said, "Oh shit, it was an April Fool's joke."
Yeah.
And she looked at me and she said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "You know what? I'm going to take a minute."
Okay.
So I went to the bathroom and I sat there and did some breathing, collected myself, and I thought, okay, so this has nothing to do with 15 years ago. This has everything to do with today.
Right.
It is April Fool's Day.
Right.
And I just had to sit there. I probably gave myself a good 5 minutes.
Right.
Went back out, sat down, and I said, that was some funny shit.
Uh-huh.
And it was like just a shift.
Right.
But that's what it took. It took understanding that I really needed to remove myself,
Right.
understanding I need to sit there and just
Right.
literally breathe,
Right.
get my head around it. It was
Right.
just a removal, really.
Right, absolutely.
So I don't know if that
It
helps.
does. It does.
Down
Now I'm
regulating.
now I'm like,
Yes.
Down regulating,
Yes.
right?
now I'm changing this to, you work in that world with addiction and drugs and alcohol and all those things, and you add that into emotional sobriety, and that changes everything. So then you're not present anymore.
Right, right, absolutely.
And that's why it's so critical. Like, let me ask you, how do I say this? Is there a healthy, like, can you drink alcohol? Can it be healthy?
If you drink alcohol,
I mean, I'm
if
just
that's
saying,
what you're asking.
like, it always seems like, that sounds stupid. Okay, so we go out to dinner, right? Like, we
Right.
all go out to dinner and we have a glass of wine and we have one every single night, right? And it just becomes like a habit.
Right.
And the next thing you know, you might have 2 glasses of wine, right? That's kind of the process,
It can be for some people.
right? I mean, but even that one glass of wine affects how your emotional intelligence or your self-regulation, wouldn't it?
Absolutely, because that one glass of wine, think about it, for anyone who's, quote, not an addict and who can go out and have one glass of wine, why do we have one glass of wine? Why? What's the response? Like if I say, hey, are you going to have a glass of wine at dinner? What are you going to say?
No, I don't like wine. I'll have a Captain and Diet, though.
No,
Right? What are you laughing at? But I would.
but why?
I don't know
Why?
why. Because I don't know.
Why? Is it social,
'Cause-
like a social mores? Is it just what you do when you go out to
Probably.
dinner?
If
Are you
there's no
trying to
reason for it.
relax? There is a reason. And my belief is that there's always a reason.
Maybe because it's a habit?
Could be. I'm gonna
Don't shake your head like
No,
I'm gonna share a story with
I was
you
an
guys.
alcoholic as a teenager, so I
Okay.
understand all
this.
this.
Right.
Okay, so and the reason why I'm asking is because like this is such an awareness for me.
Okay.
Right? And we talked about addiction.
Yeah.
And for a long time, I could have 4 or 5 drinks sitting down like it's no big deal.
Right.
That's an alcoholic. And I do it every night.
Okay.
Right? And finally I'm like, okay, this isn't gonna work.
What
like,
are you running away from?
That's my point. What was I running away from? Like, I think I was running away from sometimes reality, sometimes
Okay.
like memories, sometimes pain.
Right.
And then you realize like
Feeling the present.
maybe sometimes, or just a break, right? Because my brain,
Okay, so go with that for a minute.
okay.
So say more about break.
Okay. So like my brain goes a million miles an hour, right?
That's anxiety, my friend. That's
Anxiety,
that.
okay.
So remember when we were talking about like the fight or flight mode?
Yeah.
That's where anxiety is born and that's where it lives. Racing thoughts, preoccupied thoughts, that's anxiety.
That's the zebra running.
That's the zebra running.
Hmm. Okay. So then I would use it to regulate that primarily.
Yeah. And we don't even have knowledge. We're just like, oh, hey, I'm going to have a drink with dinner because it's normal, it's habit, it's routine.
Self-medicating.
It's like we're self-medicating a lot of what goes on during the day without even realizing it.
Yeah. I actually asked a question. I was like, well, if we don't drink, then what are we going to do? I actually said that. And I know that's horrible, right? Like, or he's like, you're a fucking idiot. But seriously, sometimes we do, right? Like I just go out to drink because that's what everybody's doing. Like I just drink.
So I went
because I'm
out to
drinking.
dinner with my friend, and I'm going to apologize to her right now because she'll probably see this. But it was really interesting to hear her perspective on this. So we went out to dinner, and by no means is she an addict. She's not. But she likes to have wine with dinner, right? For people, it can be cultural. It can be just like, hey, we're just going out or whatever the case is. And the guy comes over to take our order and she orders like a glass of wine, no big deal. And he looks at me and he's like, what are you having? And I was like, Diet Coke, no ice, please. And she just looked at me and she's like, wow, you're not going to have wine? And I was like, no, I don't like it. I don't, I might have a glass of wine like once a year. And it's whatever to me. And she's like, that's really inspiring. And when she said it was inspiring that I didn't have a glass of wine at dinner, like I couldn't wrap my head around it. It's just not something I enjoy. It's not a thing that I do. That's just me. I'm not saying it's right or wrong.
That's an interesting
Yeah.
response.
So why?
Inspiring.
See, that's the thing. That's going to be our next segment is why.
Inspiring.
You just asked me why I would drink.
Yeah.
That's like, that kind of puts you on the spot, right? Then you have to really be honest. Like, why would I have a drink? Why do I have one? Why do I have
Right.
two? Why did I
Right.
have 5?
Right.
Right?
Right.
Is it to hide? Is it to manage your anxiety? Is it to but it's something because you don't necessarily need to drink.
Right. Right.
Okay, so then, and this is, I'm being super careful with this next comment I'm going to make, but on every freaking corner, down every street, there's a bar, a restaurant, a liquor store, a Circle K. It's everywhere.
Yep.
So do you think that that's an indication of like our mental health? You know what I mean?
Well, if we're talking sobriety, though, now we're talking dispensaries, and
Well,
we're talking
I
altered
think
states of
we,
mind.
Like, so
And I'm not trying to be rude. I mean, I know there's
Right, no,
also,
I'm just talking about
and there's a
altered
healthy
state of mind.
aspect to that too.
I don't think it's being rude. I think it's being real. And for me, I think of like a bigger picture. I think of like something more macro. I think about Western culture and like how it lines up with my value system. That's just me. It's subjective. Do I think it's healthy that we have like, all these places all over? Not necessarily, because we are a culture of people who depend on something to get us out of the life that we have created that we hate.
Holy shit. That's gnarly.
Well,
I don't hate my life, though.
Add to that pharmaceuticals. I mean, it's just the list goes on and on.
Absolutely.
Just an
It's
ability
powerful.
to not feel what we are feeling or could feel.
We are
running from it.
We don't own ourselves most of the time.
Right.
Think about this. Think about all of the standards that we need to meet, whether it's from work, whether it's from, our peer group, the culture around us, the government. There's so many people and entities dictating what we need to do, when we need to do it, and we constantly
How we need to feel, how we need to respond.
We don't own ourselves most of the time, and we spend so much time trying to get away from that. Hence, we have a lapse of emotional sobriety. So it's like, how do we maintain ourselves? How do we regulate in a world full of craziness, essentially?
Wow.
Someone asked me the other day in group, that whole Will Smith, Chris Rock thing happened.
Oh, gosh.
And at the end of group, this person was like, are we not going to talk about that? And I said, honestly, we give that stuff way too much power. I said, and there's so many things going on in the world right now, really big things that are not being captured on the news, and other things that are captured on the news. And we are a culture that's obsessed with trauma and drama. Why do I give a fuck about that?
Yeah, but
I have enough
drama
stuff.
more than trauma.
Right. I have enough stuff going on in my own life. And if I'm paying attention to that stuff, I'm not paying attention to my stuff. And I need to stay in my lane. I need to figure out my stuff, because I'm over here trying to just regulate myself on a daily basis, because it's what makes me feel good. The less attention I pay to like the external world, to include social media, right? I feel better when I reflect internally, when I validate myself. It's not about me going out and seeking external validation from people, places, and things, because I keep the cycle up. But when I come home to myself, and Eric knows that term really well, at the end of my group sessions, I do this quiet meditation where we have like our hand on our heart, and we are reminded that our heart has been beating since before we were born, and it's never given up on us. Think about that. Through all the stuff you've ever been through, good and bad, your heart has never given up on you. Even if you've gone into cardiac arrest, even if something tragic has happened, there has been something or someone keeping that thing beating, which means that your track record is 100%. And when you stop and you realize that you are the center of your universe and no one can determine your value and your worth, and you are responsible for yourself by coming home to yourself, it's a really powerful shift. For me, that's emotional sobriety.
I love that. It's amazing.
Holy crap.
Amazing.
We might have to just keep that on the loop.
Yeah.
We can keep it in the loop.
That was, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So I was smiling.
Yeah.
Because there's a smart ass sitting on the couch. Her name's Nicole. And she looked over here and she was like smiling at me when you were talking, because we have this big dialogue. We have a dialogue, a constant dialogue, right? Because we're both Virgos. But we have a dialogue about ego and how hard it is. And that's emotional sobriety too, right? Okay, so why do you drive this car? Or why do you do this? Or why do you do that? Is this ego? Or is this like a passion? Or is this like what's healthy, what's not healthy, right? Am I doing this because I want to look cool? am I doing this because I really actually enjoy this piece or what, right? Like that's a hard thing. So when you were talking through some of those things, you're always self-regulating. I'm always like, and now more than ever, I'm more
Checking in.
present than I've ever been in my life.
Yeah.
Mostly because I figured out how to be by myself and doing my little sabbatical thing for 33 days. That's a big deal. And I came back as a different person.
What do you think happened in that time?
Man, what do I think happened that time?
Think about the idea of taking a sabbatical. What is a sabbatical? Not the definition, but for you, what is it?
For me, it was learning how to be by myself and breaking a habit.
Okay.
It was breaking that cycle. It was breaking a habit of identifying like who I am with other things in my life or other people in my life and not having that constant battle.
Okay.
And it was really knowing and understanding who I truly am, but owning that and believing it.
Okay. Were you outside of your typical environment?
Yes.
Where you're constantly stimulated?
Huge.
Okay.
Huge.
And sometimes it takes an environmental shift. That's why we go on vacation. That's why people move.
Geographical removal.
For like when we remove the stimuli that are causing all of these thoughts to just circle in our head, we're able to detach from that and come home to ourselves. What are my values? Who am I without X, Y, and Z happening?
The quote, find yourself.
Yeah.
Now, what's your view on social media? Since we're talking about this, is social media the same thing? That's a type of addiction too?
Yes, there's actually a classification in the DSM for like electronics, and I believe social media would fall into that as well. I think there has been a huge progression with social media. I think that it can be incredibly helpful at times for some people and for some platforms. For the mainstream, I think that it's incredibly damaging. When we are mindlessly scrolling through our accounts, why are we even scrolling? It does become an addiction. And I was watching, I want to say it was like a documentary on Netflix where the algorithm, depending on like how long you like hold down on like an image or whatever you like, or whatever you decide you don't want to show up on your feed, it begins to predict what you're going to like and what you're not going to like. So in a way, it's almost like reading our thoughts.
And then it withholds everything.
And then it
withholds likes, and then will all of a sudden show 50 likes at one time to get you back on.
Right.
And then it learns your pattern of when you go on. Yeah. It's fascinating.
It's fascinating.
It was designed by
creepy.
the Vegas gamers.
Yeah, it's fascinating and creepy. And I'm like, no one is going to have that much power and control over me. There are people I have in like my friend circle who are just like, you're MIA. Where the hell are you? And I'm just like, I'm with myself. Right? It's like my absence on social media, or, you know, if I'm not reaching out to people. I'm a quiet person. I go within. I do a lot of reflective work. I'm constantly around people. It's what I do for a living. And I love it. I absolutely love it. However, at the end of the day, I need to create an environment for myself where I can detach from all of that, to include social media, and I don't become it. I cannot identify myself. I cannot place my value based on what's being reflected back to me from social media. If that makes any sense.
Right.
No, it totally does. It makes all the sense.
And that's where everyone's getting off.
But
track.
isn't that that's
the
what we're,
damaging part that you're talking about?
Yeah.
Because their value, it's like their social currency is in
Yes.
number of likes
Right.
and comments.
Right.
and this is the thing too. This is everything every day. The kind of car you drive, the way you dress. You know, what is self-care and what is like over the top.
Well,
right?
I'll give you this example. On Thursday or Friday of last week, I received some pretty hard news. And it's about my dog, who I've had for a really long time. And I'll leave it at that. I'm not going to feed it any negative energy. And I'm like on my lunch break in my office, and I'm having a conversation with one of my colleagues, and I'm sure he's going to watch this, and he's probably going to be laughing already. And I'm just like, yeah, like I really like Gucci. I've always really liked Gucci, right? So I'm sitting in my office and I'm like, yeah, like let me just go on the website. And he's getting married, so we were talking about like clothing and shoes and the whole 9 yards. So I just like hop online real quick and I immediately see these like beautiful slides, which I have with me today so I could take off my heels.
Very nice.
Right? And I'm just like, oh man, I want that. And I had to slow down. It was like an hour-long conversation. I was like, is this an impulse buy? Am I doing it because I feel bad about my dog? Am I doing it because I bust my ass every day and I want to reward myself because I like nice things? And that's
Have
the
you been
answer.
thinking about him a long time?
Oh yeah,
You go,
I
yes,
have been
perfect.
considering it for about
But, like,
7
I'm
months.
helping you
or so.
rationalize.
I know. So it's not an impulsive decision.
You can overthink shit too, right?
I totally overthink. Yeah, absolutely. I think we all do. But in that moment, I was like, you know what? Like, they're not terribly expensive. It's not
Theory
terribly
of relativity in
expensive.
shopping.
Right. And I really like them. I'm going to use them all of the time. In my life, there's a lot of things that are really wonderful and I have a lot of gratitude for. And there's also some really hard stuff. And I'm going to utilize these shoes. And I really did ask myself, I said, is this an ego move? Can I actually really afford this? So there was a lot of rationalization.
Right.
But at the end of the day, we're human beings. I want the shoes because I like them, and the name says Gucci. How's that for transparency and vulnerability?
It's perfect.
Like I like them. I don't
honesty.
have a better answer.
Sounds truthful.
I don't have a better answer.
So is it ego? Is it ego because it's Gucci? Like, what's the difference between Gucci and like the Nike ones you can get at Walmart? Or not even Nike at Walmart, like
No.
Walmart ones.
Yeah,
I don't know
no.
what they are.
I mean, because I've had those and they've broken, and they're uncomfortable.
And they don't say Gucci.
Well, no. When I put these on, I'm like, this is quality right here. Right? I'm just like, these are
Well, it
not
is,
going to
though.
But
break.
it's also it's a
is.
brand that you aligned yourself with.
It is.
I mean,
and,
it's
and to be honest with you, like I grew up in New York City, and that's what like me and my cousins did.
part of
Like
it,
we
see?
went to
Values.
Little Italy, and like I learned really early on how to negotiate prices for like fake brands. And I just happened to fall in love with the fake Gucci brand as a young kid. And so like as an adult, I'm just like, yeah, like I really actually value this.
one day
like,
you're going to have them.
yeah. And for me, it's a reflection of I work really hard. I haven't had anything that's been given to me. And so for me, it is rewarding myself in a way. And it is, I see it as like a healthy reward. It's not something that I do every day, all of the time. But I'm like, yeah, like I'm going to cherish this thing. I place value on it. And I also place value on myself. I get up really early every single day and I go to work. Why am I working so hard? Is it to maintain the roof over my head and my dog's lifestyle? Or like, what am I getting out of it? So it is giving back to myself in a way.
That's interesting. And so then the next question would be, when is it an unhealthy thing? Like when would be buying Gucci shoes an unhealthy thing? When you buy them every day, or
So
like when does it
according to
become an
the-
ego thing, right?
So according to the DSM,
Oh, here we
right?
go. That's a big book.
It is a big book. When something begins to interfere with occupational and interpersonal functioning. So in other words, if I was like cohabitating with like a partner, right? And they were just like, oh, like, let's like hang out, let's have dinner together. And I'm just like, no, like I need to like get these shoes. It becomes a preoccupation. Right. That's when it like heads more into that addictive.
Or I can't buy dinner because I bought
Right.
3 pairs of slides this week.
Right.
Okay, that's
And which
a
I
good
totally, and I had that conversation with my colleague. I was like, well, like just weighing it out.
Sure.
Right.
That's a great example. When it starts to interfere with your life, right? And so,
Physically, financially, emotionally.
right.
or you're, I have some buddies that watch sports, right? Like I was at the lake this weekend, everybody's watching sports. And it was like, oh no, I can't do that because the game's on.
Right.
And I'm like, dude, really? Like it's recorded. You know what I'm saying? Things like that. And I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying
Right.
that for me, that would be not,
Right.
that's not like exactly healthy. So we're going to miss going to go do something fun and exciting. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like that's when I see what you're saying. That makes sense now. I guess that would apply to ego and everything then.
Absolutely. When we become so fixated on something, when we're ruminating on something and we cannot get it out of our heads, that is a lack of emotional sobriety. It could be with anything. It could be with anything.
It could be with people, with work, with a thing. Huh.
Good stuff.
Eric's, where they're like, he's like, yeah, dude, I already knew all this shit.
He does know all
Look
this.
how relaxing
Yeah.
it is.
He does.
Super cool. Super cool.
It's good stuff.
What else you got?
What else do you have?
Man, I
I
could
mean,
sit here
like-
all day and listen to you. Like, seriously. I think
Sometimes
that's
I feel
this
like
is the
I'm not
quietest I've
even,
ever
like,
been.
Sometimes I feel like I talk too much and I'm not even making
No.
sense.
No, this is the
Everything you said
emotional
was
sobriety.
fantastic.
This is all about like
Incredibly
this
helpful.
is all about mindset though. It is all about, instead of like reacting to something and acting on impulse, it is literally about slowing down. And sometimes we have a hard time being with ourselves and slowing down because for a lot of us, we've done things, said things that we regret deeply. And I think about my own life. There's parts of my life that I do regret deeply.
Oh my gosh.
And thinking about it like makes me like crawl out of my skin in so many ways. And I always remind myself to have grace and compassion
For yourself, for
for
sure.
myself, absolutely. But also knowing that I did the best that I could in that moment with the knowledge and resources that I had.
And you can't beat yourself up about it.
And,
Right.
and remember
That's all you
too,
had at the time.
Right.
You know, you said a whole bunch of stuff that piles on, and I think of, you know, decisions that I made in my life that were not the best. And there's always there's always events and things that I wasn't dealing with to lead me to that situation. And almost always, we talk about this a lot, is that there's not a truth, that there's a lie somewhere in that deal, or there's a lot of lies somewhere in that deal, and then it comes out sideways. And that's when
Right.
you don't behave the way that you normally would, right? Because I think we're all good at heart. I really do. And I think the more that we don't process and we're not present and we're, you know, eradicating our lives with alcohol or drugs or whatever it is, or just trauma or
Right.
just pain or not
Right.
communicating or whatever, then that shit comes out sideways, and that's when we make bad decisions.
It does. And don't forget, there's so many components of it that are intergenerational and
Breaking the
intercultural.
cycle.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right.
I talked to my son about that, you know, breaking the cycle. He's like, Dad, why do you tell me everything? I'm like, because I want you to know. I don't want you to do that. I want to
Okay.
break the cycle.
Right.
Right? Like, why would you
Right.
not be honest? Why would you not tell them? And be honest openly too. And we demonstrated that here on the show. Somebody asked me, they're like, oh, was that for a drama factor? And I'm like, no, it wasn't. It was to show that to get anywhere that resembles any type of healing, you have to at least be truthful with yourself. Maybe you don't say it on public, you know, a public forum. That's fine. But you do have to be truthful with who you really, really are and the stuff that you've done to get to where you're at. Because if you
Absolutely.
can't identify what the truth is, and you can't heal it.
No, there's absolute truth to that, which is why I always go back to like, what are your values? Are you truly living in alignment with your values? And if I sat here and I said, tell me all your values right now, what are like the top three?
Oh man, gratitude, integrity, truth.
Okay. Shelly, what are your top three?
Gratitude, family, spirituality.
Okay. So now, knowing what your top three values are, every single thing you do when you leave here, when you talk to people, is it coming from that place? Right? And that's not a question that you need to answer right now. I know for myself, that's my own internal check. One of the questions you asked earlier was, how do you know if you have emotional sobriety? How do you know if you're regulated? For me, that's my checks and balances system. It's like a coffee filter in a way, and that's usually how I explain it to people. Think about like an old school coffee maker, like not like the pot on the stove
Right.
boiling, but like
The cone.
but like pre-Keurig, right?
Yeah.
But like think about like the coffee filter. You put the coffee grinds in there, and then it filters out the grinds, so you just have like the pure coffee. For me, my value system is that filter.
And so when you ask that question, a green flag for me is thinking positively. Like things can be great, right? And one of my challenges, more so in the past, was like, oh, I can be treated good, right? Like that's a big deal.
Right.
And accepting that, like we talked about compliments
Right,
earlier, I think
right.
you were listening.
Yeah.
And if you can accept a compliment, that's a big deal too.
It is. It
right?
is a really big deal.
But I always picture myself like, okay, is this decision in the light or in the dark? Like,
Okay.
is this good or bad?
yeah.
And we always balance that 'cause it's all within us, right? Like we have the devil and an angel in us
Right,
all the time.
right.
And that's how I do that value system. Like, is this in the light or is this like more in the dark? Like ego might be more in the dark, or, is this philanthropic? Is this like going to help somebody? Is it going to hurt anybody?
Right,
Is it going to make me better? Is it going to make my day better? Things like that. That's kind of like the easiest way I can do it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because guys aren't as smart as women. Clearly, we've identified that multiple times, even today.
Obviously.
Well, and one of the shows we did recently too, we did perception versus reality. I think I just put that one up. And we talked about values because that's obviously, we say, well, my perception is my reality. We talked about that.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's where our perception, that's where our reality comes from, is our values and our experience and
Right.
our history.
Right.
So when someone tries to convince you that your perception is wrong, your reality is wrong, well, your reaction to it might not be correct at the
Right.
time, but no one can change what that is.
Right.
That's
Right.
your base,
Right,
right?
right.
So that's the discussion that we
It
had,
is.
and it was
Yeah. And
Yeah.
here's one of the things I want to do. Can you hang out more?
Sure.
Super smart girl. Okay, so let's take a break, and then I want to talk about the why.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
All right. Everybody, is that cool with you, Robin? All right. Everybody, thank you for watching The Knot. We're going to take a break real quick and come back with another segment.